Well, good morning everybody and welcome to today's webinar, Cloud ERP for Small Manufacturers. This is the third in a series of 6 webinars brought to you by the Optimizing Business Broadband program. My name is Martin King-Turner and I'm an independent IT consultant from the National B2B Centre. And in this webinar today we'll be looking at how small manufacturing businesses can harness the benefits of cloud and superfast broadband to enable them to run their ERP systems. Now, as we go through the webinar, if you have any questions, you can use the box on the right-hand side of your screen to type the questions in. They will come through to me, and I will do my best to make a little bit of time to answer them at the end of today's session. So, here's what we'll look at. We'll very briefly take a look at what is ERP. Then we will look at the benefits of Cloud ERP and compare Cloud ERP with other options such as hosted ERP and on-premise ERP. I'll then show you an example of a Cloud ERP system, one that is especially focused on small manufacturers. Let me emphasize at this point that I'm a completely independent IT consultant, so any system names I mention and I show you is based on my experience and my suggestions that these systems are appropriate for small businesses. I'm in no way linked commercially or otherwise to any particular ERP system or ERP system vendor. And when we've taken a look at that particular system, I will close the webinar with a few thoughts and considerations about implementing ERP, any kind of ERP system, whether it's the one we talk about specifically today, whether it's cloud-based or whether it's indeed a hosted or on-premise system. But before we dive into that, let me just say a few words about the Optimizing Business Broadband program in Shropshire and Staffordshire. This program is on the back of the fibre rollout that's happening across the 2 counties. There's 2 other sister projects running, one called Connecting Shropshire, one called Superfast Staffordshire, and these 2 projects are focusing on the superfast and fibre infrastructure in the 2 counties. So as you can see on the slide there, in Shropshire there's about £26 million of government BT and BD UK funding going to meet the objective of having 93% of premises in Shropshire with access to fibre-based network by spring 2016, and everywhere having access to at least a minimum of 2 megabits per second for broadband. And in Staffordshire there's an equivalent programme, similar levels of funding, and that programme is aiming to achieve 97% of premises accessing fibre-based, having access to fibre-based network by, again, spring of 2016. And if you want to know more about what's going on in those 2 programmes and perhaps understand whether your particular premises are likely to get connected, and if so, in what time frame, then please take a look at those 2 websites on the screen now, connectingshropshire.co.uk and superfaststaffordshire.co.uk. Where there's extensive information, including maps of areas covered and similar information, and also sign up to their follow them on Twitter to get all the latest news. So that was about the actual connections, but the Optimizing Business Broadband project itself is actually a project aimed to help small businesses make better use of the superfast connection once it becomes available to them. As you can see, it's a European funded project. It runs from now until June of next year, and there are four key types of activities going on within the project. There are a series of awareness raising events. You may have seen some of those running in various locations around both Shropshire and Staffordshire. There's a series of practical learning being made available. So, these webinars are one example of that. So there's also lots more tips, hints, guides and workbooks all available online through the optimizingbusinessbroadband.co.uk website. For eligible businesses, there is the opportunity of face-to-face support. So that's consultancy support from myself and colleagues in the consultancy team, where we will come and work with you, come and visit you, come and work with you actually at your premises to help you understand the opportunities that Superfast Broadband gives to your business, and provide whatever help and support and advice you need to help you make best use of it. And there is also some particular follow-up and specialist training available later in the programme, coming on stream next year. But if you want to know more about any of that or all of that, please go to the optimizingbusinessbroadband.co.uk website. I guess you've already visited it to sign up for today's webinar, but please do take a look around that site. There's lots of great material there. And also, again, please do follow us on Twitter, where we regularly update people with progress, alert people to upcoming events, and keep people abreast of Superfast news across the two counties. So let's get down to business then. Let's talk about ERP, and just to make sure everybody has a similar level of understanding, let's just talk about what is ERP. If you look it up in Wikipedia, this is what you will find. You'll see ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning, and it's business management software, so it's computer software, usually a suite of integrated applications that a company can use, a manufacturing company use, to store and manage data from every stage of the business, which all sounds great, but what does it really mean? What it really means is that you've got a software package, usually delivered in a modular form, and by modular form I mean you can use the bits of the system that are relevant to your business and not use other bits that you don't need to. And typically they cover the areas such as those now on the screen. So inventory management, all the operations in your stores and your warehouse. So purchasing, so the raising of purchase orders, and booking those, receiving those into your organisation, booking those in, and that following through to purchase invoices. Similarly on sales, so the management of sales, maybe sales quotations, the management of sales orders, the dispatch of goods, and then the subsequent creation of sales invoices. It covers the manufacturing area of your business, so that's all the things that go on on the shop floor, both from a material point of view, so what parts are, what raw materials, what components are issued out onto the factory floor, but also can cover and manage and control the actual operations that go on the shop floor, so and the resources, so which machines are involved, what are the processes, how long do things take, how much do things cost, and also the management of people, and that particularly people's time. And some systems will enable you to record time on the shop floor, capture time from the shop floor via either via timesheets or directly onto screens, to enable you to both have a visibility of your resource utilisation, but also to track and manage costs through your factory. Many systems also cover distribution. If you're a business where there is a significant number of significant logistics operations, so you may have you may have a number of trucks delivering goods around the country. You may have stores not just at your main site, but at other locations. So the managing of the inventory and the flow of parts and materials between all those stores, so managing that distribution, and the management of finance. So that is both accounts payable and accounts receivable on the end of the purchasing and sales process, but also the management of the core financial ledgers, so your general ledger, sales ledger, purchase ledger, management of your assets, management of your cash, and so forth. So ERP typically covers all of those areas. Now, just a word of caution: if you Google ERP and look for ERP software, you will find a plethora of it. There's hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands and thousands of software packages that claim to be ERP. What I would say is that I'm sure that all of those packages will include at least some aspects of the functionality that you see on the screen, but don't assume that all packages will cover all functionality. They won't, and they don't. So I'm afraid you do have to spend a little bit of time, in some cases quite a lot of time, understanding what the capabilities are of any one particular package before you can make an informed judgment about its suitability to your organisation. If that's something you feel you need help with in terms of understanding which ERP systems may or may not be appropriate for your organisation, then that is certainly one of the areas of expertise that is available to you through the OBB program. So please do get in touch. So today I said we were going to focus specifically on Cloud ERP. So why should we be interested in that? What are the benefits? Well, here are some of them. The first one, lower upfront costs. In a cloud environment, the ERP software doesn't run on servers on your premises. The software runs in a data center on the cloud. And so the initial costs that you face when you're implementing an ERP system, many of them are not there if you go with a cloud-based system. In particular, you will not be paying for hardware, you will not be paying for software licenses, and you will not be having to pay for the technical parts of any implementation consultancy costs. Lower operating costs it really come from the fact that you're not having to run and manage and maintain your own IT servers on your premises. So you'll be saving costs in upgrades, you'll be saving costs in IT staff, IT support. There will also be some cost savings in areas such as energy and so forth. Rapid implementation, yes, it's certainly in terms of the software, because the software is there available and you can just sign up and use it really immediately. There are still quite a few considerations in terms of actually getting it implemented in your business, in terms of getting the right people trained up using an ERP system in the right way. So I wouldn't want to give you the impression that using cloud-based ERP means you're fully up and running, everything sorted in a matter of minutes. It's not quite that simple, but at least the technical side of it you don't have to worry about if you go cloud. Scalability, you don't have to worry about server capacity, database capacity, and all those kind of things. If you need to expand, if your company's growing, you want to expand the number of users in your ERP system, you want to bring new modules online, then you can simply do that by starting to use them on the cloud-based system that's provided. You don't have the IT planning and headaches around that. And allied to that is rapid updates and upgrades. The cloud service provider is responsible for providing those updates and upgrades to the system. It's not something that you have to manage or indeed pay for. Improved accessibility really comes from the fact that as it's a cloud-based system, then so long as you have an internet connection, it doesn't matter where you are in the world or when you are choosing to use it, the system will be available to you, and it'll be the same system that's available to you sat in your office. And the final point on this slide, the improved availability and disaster recovery, is alludes to the fact that, again, if you have no server on your premises, then you are not having to spend time and money covering areas such as backups and such as disaster recovery, planning and contingencies, because again, that is what the Cloud ERP solution provider will be doing through their data center. Now, I'd just like to put all of those benefits in the context and compare them with the similar areas when you look at hosted ERP or what I might call the traditional on-premise ERP. Now, just so that everybody's clear here, when I talk about Cloud ERP, I'm talking about ERP provided software as a service. So all the servers, all the IT infrastructure, and the cloud software itself is all provided to you as a service. So you sign up for it as purely a user of the system. For hosted ERP is where the computer servers are not on your premises. They're in a data center owned by a third party of some sort, but you still have your own ERP system and software, probably commercial software that you bought, but it is your own copy of that software that you install and you configure and you maintain yourself, but the server is not on your premises. And the on-premise ERP is what you might call the sort of the traditional ERP setup, where everything is on your premises, all the hardware and all the software is all on your premises. So there are three quite different environments, and again, just a word of warning: there are a number of Cloud ERP systems, or systems that claim to be Cloud ERP, that are in fact hosted ERP. So when you see a vendor talking about Cloud ERP, it's another one of those things where you need to do a little bit of homework, a little bit of digging to find out whether they're talking about Cloud ERP software as a service, which is the context I'm using it in for today's webinar, or whether they're talking about hosted ERP, because the two are rather different. Again, if that's an area that you'd like some help with, then please do contact us. So to compare the three scenarios then with the areas that I talked about on the previous slide and one or two other ones. Firstly, upfront costs. As we've already said, Cloud ERP, Cloud Software as a Service ERP, has a definite advantage here in reducing upfront costs, because you are not having to buy servers, you're not having to buy software licenses, you're not having to buy any implementation or IT implementation consultancy. If you look at hosted will save you some upfront costs, but the only costs it will save you will be the IT hardware costs, because you will still be responsible for buying licenses, and you will still be responsible for having to either yourself directly or incurring consultancy costs to get those software licenses installed and configured on the hosted system. If you have it all on-premise, you have all of those costs. Particularly for small manufacturers, then reducing or indeed removing the need for those upfront costs, typically those large capital costs, is a very, very attractive thing, because you no longer have to find an ERP project, no longer needs to be a capital intensive project that's going to cost you 20, 30, 40, 50, maybe more £1,000. If you go Cloud ERP, your expenditure and your costs are entirely revenue-based costs. So they are monthly usage costs. There's no capital costs whatsoever. And that can be a huge bonus and a huge benefit, particularly to small businesses. If you look at the next one, lower operating costs, again, we've talked about that. Again, the Cloud ERP wins on that. The hosted provides some degree of reduction of operating costs compared with everything being on your premises. The main reduction in operating costs for hosted is that you don't have a server in your on your premises, so you don't have the ongoing costs of maintaining that server, making sure it's running, keeping the operating system upgraded, and all of those support costs. On the downside of cloud, it says no non-depreciable subscription fees. So, as I've already said, in a cloud environment, your fees, your costs are revenue costs, which usually is an attractive thing. But if there's benefit to you of having your costs as depreciable capital costs rather than revenue, then on-premise will be a better solution financially. Looking at the second set then, so scalability. Cloud again wins on that one because you are not having to worry about server capacity, server upgrades, disk space, and all those other things. That's what the Cloud ERP service provider does and manages. Then it is much easier to scale up a cloud-based system. Easier in the sense that you simply sign up for some more users. It'll therefore probably increase your monthly costs, but you won't have any IT upgrades to worry about. And similarly around rapid implementation. As I've already said, I don't want to give you the impression that if you sign up to Cloud ERP and that's all you'd have to do to get it to truly utilised to the best advantage in your business. But it is certainly the case that you can get up and running, at least having the system up and available to you much more quickly on a cloud infrastructure than anywhere else. To give you just one example of that, I was recently called into a company, a manufacturing company, who had a serious fire, and that fire had damaged beyond repair their on-premise server, and so they actually had, and on that server was running their ERP system, and so they had no access to their ERP system. Luckily, they did have some backups of and off-site copies of data, but it was only the data. And had they chosen to buy a new server and reinstall that system and go down that route, it would have taken many weeks to get them back online. They actually took the opportunity to move to a cloud-based ERP system as a result of that fire, having had that traumatic experience, and were able to be up and running within 2 days because they didn't have to provision any IT servers, any IT at all. All they needed was their superfast broadband connection or a broadband connection, and they're up and running. Cloud will also help reduce your requirement for IT technical resources. We talked about that. But one consideration about cloud and indeed the hosted environment is that you will be more dependent on your ERP solution provider and your cloud solution provider. If you have a system on your premises, then once that's up and running and working, then to some degree at least, the ball is in your own court. You have freedom to choose how much or otherwise you interact with the provider of your software. At some point you probably will have to for upgrades and things like that, but often people leave it 2, 3, 4 years before they do upgrades. I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing, but it can be done. Whereas if you are on a cloud or indeed on a hosted environment, if the service provider no longer provides that cloud or hosting service, then you are somewhat up the proverbial creek. Just a few more thoughts on cloud versus hosted versus on-premise. If I look at functionality, then I think it is fair to say that the cloud software as a service ERP systems typically do have less functionality ultimately than the hosted and particularly some of the on-premise solutions. However, for small manufacturers, then there are a number of cloud ERP solutions, including the one I will talk about in a minute, that provide all the functionality that an average small SME manufacturer will need. So yes, it is true that hosted and on-premise can ultimately provide more functionality, but in an SME context, cloud ERP provides plenty. The next two areas, cloud clearly has some advantages, rapid bug fixes and new functionality. If you are in a cloud environment, then the ERP solution provider will be implementing upgrades, updates, new functionality and bug fixes really on a continual basis, and you will benefit from those. You do not have to worry about any of those upgrades and how to install them and test them and all of those other things that go with an on-premise solution. And as we've already talked about, if you have your ERP in the cloud, it is by definition accessible from anywhere where there's an internet connection. So whether you're in the office, whether you're at home, whether you're visiting clients, whether you're waiting for a train or an aeroplane, wherever it is, you will have access to your system. And that's not always the case with, certainly with on-premise solutions. Although that can be enabled, again, there's more complexity and cost to do that when you've got to set up secure network connections, VPNs, and all those kind of things to provide access to on-premise solutions. So accessibility, mobility, and usability is a key strength of a cloud ERP system. When we look at the last area, integration and customization, there are some considerations here when going cloud. The first one, it's true to say that if you're using a cloud ERP system, then the amount of customization you can do, and by customization I'm talking about changing the way that the software functions, your opportunities to do that on a cloud ERP system are very limited. If you have the system on premise, and indeed if you have it hosted, but you're still in direct control of the software, it is much easier and much more feasible for that system to be customized, albeit by the software provider or one of their implementation consultants. So what does that mean for cloud? Well, it means two things. One is that if you're going to go cloud ERP, you need to be sure that the functionality of the cloud ERP is appropriate and what you need for your business. And I'll just say a few words about that towards the end of the webinar. But I would also say that in general, customization of ERP systems, whilst possible if it's for on-premise and hosted systems, my personal opinion is that that's something you want to minimize or avoid if at all possible, because firstly, because they will be likely to be expensive to do in the first place, but even more because when it comes to things such as upgrading the implementation or even just the installation of fixes, then those customizations will have to be re-examined and checked to make sure that they're compatible with the new versions of the software as they come out from the software supplier. And again, that is all ongoing cost. So just a word of advice and warning in general is that I strongly advise all my clients to reduce the level of amount of customization in ERP projects anyway, whether they're going cloud or not. When you look at disaster recovery and availability, cloud again has some advantages. The main advantage being that it is no longer your responsibility to plan for and implement disaster recovery solutions or indeed backup. For a cloud-based system, that is all done by the Cloud ERP provider. In a hosted environment, the hosting provider will do some of that for you, whereas if it's on-premise, that ball is fairly and squarely in your court with the costs and complexity that brings. On the low dependency on internet reliability and speed, it is certainly true to say that in both the cloud and the hosted environments, you are reliant on your internet connection from wherever you are, from your offices, from your factory, from home if you're doing it from home. You are reliant on that internet connection to access your system. Whereas if it's on your premises and you are on your premises, then it only relies on the network within your own building. There's no getting away from that, but with the advent of fibre broadband, superfast broadband, that issue is really going away now, and I would certainly say anybody who has access to superfast broadband, then that is more than sufficient to run a cloud-based ERP solution. So if you have superfast broadband or considering superfast broadband, then that absolutely is the right infrastructure for a cloud ERP implementation. And the final point on this chart is the integration point. So it is undoubtedly easier to integrate if you've got other systems already running on your premises, then it is easier to integrate an on-premise ERP system with those other systems. That's not to say it's impossible to do it in a cloud and a hosted environment, but it is certainly more complex. And so that is another consideration as to what level of integration with other systems you are looking for. Okay, so we've talked fairly extensively then about cloud versus hosted versus on-premise, but what's actually happening in the real world? Well, what I'm seeing happening, and many others are seeing the similar thing, is that there is definitely a move towards cloud and cloud-based ERP. This chart is a survey that compares the position in 2012 and 2013. I haven't yet seen the 2014 results. I think they'll be coming out in the next month or so. But what this shows is that if you look at the darker colour, the 2013 colour, more people are towards the right-hand end of this chart. So in 2013, 22% of companies in this survey had 60 to 100% of their IT, including their ERP, in the cloud. I'm certainly working with a number of companies now, particularly including small businesses and startups, who are going and are using cloud ERP because they don't want the complexity and the costs of having to set up all the necessary IT infrastructure in-house in order to run an ERP system. So the benefits that we talked about earlier, reducing those upfront costs, being able to get up and running very rapidly, the flexibility, the scalability, the ability to work from not just the office but from wherever they choose to be, people are seeing those as really attractive. And the costs of a cloud-based ERP can be significantly lower than the costs of on-premise ERP, and I'll give you some examples of some real costs in just a minute or two. So I've said that I'll talk about, I'll give you an example of a particular cloud-based ERP system, and the cloud-based ERP system that I'm going to just say a few words about is one called Menu Online. I am reliably informed that the menu is related to, or is a nod towards the word manufacturing. It is nothing to do with a well-known football team. The website is www.menuonline.com. If you do Google menu, you will find lots of websites about a particular football team rather than Menu Online. So if you want to find out more, please either go directly to the URL or make sure you search for Menu Online. It's a cloud-based ERP system. It is only available through the cloud, so it's not available hosted. It's not available on premise. So it is cloud or nothing if you go with Menu. To give you a feel for it, all the information I'm showing here is from the Menu website, and let me just reiterate at this point what I said at the start of this webinar. I am in no way, I'm an independent IT consultant, so I am in no way associated with Menu. I have no commercial relationship with them. The reason I'm using it for this webinar is it is a system that I know a number of clients are using and experiencing some significant benefits from using it, and it is aimed and developed and designed specifically for small manufacturers. So it comes in a number of flavors. The most cost-effective, the starting point is on the left-hand side of the screen here. There's the standard edition, and as you can see, it costs £19 per user, per concurrent user. That's per month. So typically if you're a small business, you may need 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 users of those. So for something like £100 a month, you can have an ERP system, a full functional ERP system available in your company. And if you just compare that with the certainly with the upfront costs of implementing an on-premise solution, where the costs will be thousands and more likely tens of thousands of pounds, the cost advantage in terms of the lack of upfront costs or no upfront costs that I talked about earlier really starts to become very significant and attractive. So in the standard edition, as you can see, you get inventory, you get sales, purchase orders, inventory control, shipping, receiving, invoicing. It says connection to bookkeeping. Menu Online doesn't have its own finance module. It actually integrates with 2 other cloud-based finance systems. One called Xero, spelled Xero, Xero, and the other one being Sage 1. So you have a choice. If you want to have an integrated finance system with Menu Online, then it'll be either Xero or Sage 1 will be the systems that it integrates with. Again, they are fully cloud-based systems, so everything, including your finance, is entirely in the cloud. There are then further features available up to what they call the Mini Enterprise Edition, which costs, you can see, about £60 per user per month. And that includes a number of other features such as sales quotations, after sales, projects, sales forecasts, supplier quotations, serial number, lot tracking, multiple step routing, barcodes, the use of barcodes on the shop floor, and a number of other things. So in my opinion at least, the breadth of functionality and the depth of functionality that's available in the Menu system covers everything that small businesses will need. and so it is not a case of having to compromise on functionality if you go this route, and that's one of the reasons why I'm talking about this particular system in today's webinar. Just to show you very briefly what it looks like, here's a few screenshots. So you can see across the top, it's a fairly standard layout. Across the top you have some main menus, so sales, purchase, warehousing, production, invoicing, some admin, and then within each area, so in sales, we're looking at sales here, you have some sub-menus down the side, and then in the main part of the screen you get the information here. We're looking at a list of parts. A fairly standard layout for an ERP system. But the point to make is that this runs through a web browser, whatever your favourite web browser is, so you don't have to install any software on devices or on your premises. Here's another screenshot that sort of zooms into some of the information you've got about parts, and a further screenshot that talks about that shows some of the information you've got here. We're looking at the information that it's tracking on the shop floor and on work orders, and as you can see perhaps on this screenshot, through your factory, we're tracking parts, so what components have been used, but it also is tracking costs. So it's tracking material costs, it's tracking labour costs, and it's tracking subcontractor costs, and therefore giving you a total cost of activities going on in your factory. So it does give you a very in-depth and a very extensive view and control of what's happening in your environment. In terms of reporting, there's two types of reporting. Firstly, the system comes with hundreds of pre-configured reports that come out as PDFs for you to either print or email directly from the system. But it also makes extensive use of Excel. So in many areas of the system, you can export data to Excel. Here's an example of data that's just been exported as text, but also it will make use of Excel to create graphs, pivot tables, and the like, such as you can see here. So between the PDF type reporting and the Excel integration, you have very extensive and very flexible reporting. So that was very briefly, just to give you a flavour for it. There are other cloud-based ERP systems around, but Menu Online is one that I would suggest you take a look at if you are considering Cloud ERP for a small manufacturing business. Okay, the final few slides on today's webinar, I want to just say a few words about ERP projects in general, and this certainly applies to cloud-based ERP, but also applies to on-premise ERP. And the first thing to say is that I'm afraid benefits are not guaranteed. The world is littered with ERP implementations in both small companies and large companies, littered with ERP implementations that didn't achieve all the benefits that they set out to do. In fact, here's some survey results taken from last year, and in this you will see that only 8% of projects actually achieved 80+% of the benefits they were looking for, and 11% no measure of benefits, 14% they didn't have a business case, so they don't know what benefits they were even looking for, 18% had half to 3/4 of the benefit they were looking for, 22% had somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2, and 27% didn't even achieve, either had no benefits at all or at best had 30% of the benefits. So the message here, and this is whether you go cloud or on-premise, is that ERP implementations are not necessarily straightforward. And some of the reasons why they're not so straightforward is on this slide. Firstly, and I guess foremost, ERP is about your business, not just about technology. So if you are going to implement an ERP system, whether it's on-premise or whether it's hosted or whether it's in the cloud, you do need to consider what impact and most importantly, what changes are going to be required in your business to make best use of that system. And by changes, I don't just mean what changes in IT technology. I mean what changes will be required in the way people work, what changes will be required in the business processes that are operating in your company, what changes will be required to people's knowledge and skill levels. No software is perfect, as it says, so all have strengths, weaknesses and trade-offs. If you do manage to find some software, cloud or otherwise, that is an absolute perfect fit for everything you want to do, then you are extremely lucky. You're certainly in the minority, and I'd actually love to hear from you, because in my experience, no software is perfect. So there are always trade-offs to be made, considerations to be thought about. And similarly, there's no one-size-fits-all strategy. So I do believe that Cloud ERP, in my experience, tells me that Cloud ERP helps to make it easier for small businesses to implement ERP, but it doesn't guarantee success on its own. There are other things you should do, and in particular, you need to think about the last point on this bullet about organizational change management, because the implementation of any kind of ERP technology, any kind of ERP system, cloud or otherwise, will necessitate changes in the way at least some people in your company operate. The most obvious example of that tends to be areas such as stores, such as the shop floor. Smaller changes probably in the way your purchasing and sales teams operate, and there may be some changes to the way your financial team operates, and in particular the way certain things are coded and the like. So there will be change in your organization. People will be working differently, and people will be, at least some of those people will be resistant to those changes, and that, I'm not having a go at anybody, that is just human nature. We as human beings, we tend to be resistant to change. And so putting in place plans and making sure you have devote enough time to overcoming any of those change issues is absolutely key to success in an ERP project. The way I think of this is what I call my 3 pillars of success. The 3 pillars being the 3 areas illustrated on this slide. The people, the process, by which I mean the business process, and the technology. The technology is the piece that most people think about when they think about ERP projects. So they think quite naturally, as of course you have to, which software, so which particular ERP software package should I choose, and as we've discussed in today's webinar, where should it run? Should it be a cloud-based system, should it be a hosted system, or should it be an on-premise system? And of course those things are all important, and those things all absolutely have to be considered, and I hope I've given you a few pointers to some of those in today's webinar. That's the good news. The bad news is that technology on its own, or worrying about and thinking about technology on its own, will not guarantee success in an ERP project. In fact, if your project really only considers and thinks about the technology, you are, in my experience, highly likely to be in the 70-odd% of projects that either fail totally or don't deliver all the benefits that you hope when you set out. So you have to think about not just the technology, you have to think about the people, and you have to think about the business processes. So when you're looking at your business processes, the key questions are, will your business processes change? And as I've already said, almost certainly the answer to that question is yes. And if they do have to change, what will the new processes be? There is a bit of a chicken and egg here between what will the processes be and which software you choose, because different ERP systems work in slightly different ways. They all have sort of a common core and a common theme, but at the detail level they do work in slightly different ways. And there is a balance to be struck between deciding or defining a process to a very high level of detail, and then trying to find an ERP system that works that way. If you go too far down that road, all you will do is you will convince yourself that there's no ERP system that exactly fits your needs. So you have to, as I say, strike a balance between dictating the process yourself and being prepared to accommodate particular processes in whichever particular ERP system you end up implementing. Again, that can be tricky. And again, that's an area that we can help you with through the OBB program if that's appropriate. The final of the three pillars is the people, and this is often the hardest one, actually, and the one that often gets neglected. And it's all about who are the users going to be, who will use the system, and ensuring that those people are involved in the project. And when I say involved, I mean feel truly involved in the project, and can see that there's clear management commitment to making this project happen. Because that is the way you want them on board, because that is the way to where you can communicate with them, and where you can take them through the process of the necessary changes, and that some of those changes are going to be changes to the system they use. So that's going to be about training, but it'll also be about changes, for some people, changes to the way they work, which is partly about training, but partly about the way that those people are managed. And lack of user involvement in the ERP project is another one of those common causes of failure, where the technology may be fine, and especially if it's a cloud-based system, the technology part of it's easy. The processes may be known, at least in theory, but if the people, if your staff are not actually going to use the system and use it in the way that the system's intended, if they're not using it in that way, you will not achieve the benefits that you're looking for as a business out of your ERP implementation. I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much for your attention this morning. If there is anything further that we can help you with around Cloud ERP or any other aspects of cloud for that matter, then please do contact us on at the website, through the website, the optimizingbusinessbroadband.co.uk website. I said I would leave a little time at the end for questions. We've got one question. The question particularly asks, are Cloud ERP systems less secure, or is the information in Cloud ERP systems less secure than information held on premise? My answer to that is there is no reason why it should be less secure if you do your homework in terms of selecting the right Cloud ERP vendor. It is certainly true that the data is not stored on servers on your premise. The data is on premises. The data is stored on servers in the service provider's data center. However, I would say that the security, if it's a reputable data center, then the security measures that will be in place in that data center will far outstrip the security measures that I've ever seen any small business have on their own systems and their own servers. But you do need to do a bit of homework. You do need to do some background research to assure yourself that the cloud service provider you're choosing, you feel confident and you feel you can trust your data to. And you do need to understand things such as whether you can take whether you can take copies of the data and store it locally wherever you wish to. You need to understand areas such as if you want to move away from that cloud system, or God forbid the cloud service provider goes out of business, what happens to your data, what provision, if any, is there for you to continue using the system for a period of time, and so forth. So there are a number of aspects to it, and if it's an area that you want to go into in more detail, then please join me in a couple of weeks' time for the 5th webinar in this series, because that webinar will be focusing entirely on cloud and cloud security, where I'll be talking through exactly this, not just in the context of ERP, but in the context of any cloud-based system, talking through the security implications of putting your data in the cloud, and some of the things that you should be looking out for and checking with any potential cloud service provider to help assure yourself that your data is indeed secure. So on that note, I will say thank you very much again. Please do visit the website, and if we can be of any further help, do contact us, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much indeed.